I'm not going to try to be brief, I'm going to be brief. And I'm going to try and answer head-on the question this panel has been asked, which is, what are the next steps towards safeguarding domestic financial stability? Well, it seems to me the answer to that is has to be around getting back to a normal in which banks perform their normal task, which is acting as a transmission mechanism between savings and investment, and entrepreneurs get back to their normal task, which is taking investment decisions. Well, what's stopping that today? As we've heard, on the bank side, what's stopping it is both a shortage of liquidity, but also a shortage of risk-taking capacity. As far as entrepreneurs, the real drivers of growth in the economy are concerned, what's stopping entrepreneurs acting normally is, first of all, a supply-side constraint, a finance supply-side constraint, and secondly, on the demand side, a constraint around the absence of sufficient certainty and stability. And for private sector entrepreneurs, of course, this is a real problem, because these two constraints, both the supply side and the demand side problem, are exogenous to them. They're not things entrepreneurs can do anything about. But it's also important, I think, to recognize that there are entrepreneurs on the public sector side. The public sector takes investment decisions too, and this is a form of entrepreneurial activity. And in contrast, on the public sector side, the requirement for stability and confidence is actually endogenous, not exogenous. So the public sector, by its investment decisions, can itself help create stability and confidence. And the key point there, I think, is that on the public sector side, that the public sector is both consistent and sets and applies prioritization. So that's, if you like, the first practical proposal that I make from today. In terms of public sector investment decisions, it's extremely important that the public sector prioritizes and then follows through. Now, for the second 2 minutes of what I want to share with you today, let me come to the issue of what institutions like the European Investment Bank, I'm sure had Sabina been able to be here, she would be saying the same point about EBRD. What can institutions like EBRD and EIB bring? Well, first of all, we should be modest, because all we can do is act on the finance supply side. But one thing that we can do, of course, is to mobilize not just European, but global funds. I mean, a very high proportion of EIB's funding for its investment decisions comes globally, comes from outside Europe. So we can be a transmission mechanism for international, for global funds. And we can act both indirectly, in other words, through the banking system, and there we can be, as EIB has traditionally been, a source of liquidity for the banks. We've done that through rather traditional mechanisms, loans to the banks, which are dedicated or hypothecated for onward transmission to the SME market. But we can also, and EIB will be bringing forward ideas for less traditional means of doing this, notably through securitization structures, and I hope we'll see some progress in that area this year. Secondly, we can work with the banking system through helping the banking system address risk capacity, and again, during this year, I hope we will be in a position to bring forward proposals for risk sharing or capital relief products for the banking market. The final point that I want to make is that both institutions like EBRD and EIB can also play an important role as direct funders of entrepreneurial activity. And for reasons of time, I'll focus purely on private sector entrepreneurial activity. Traditionally, EIB has been a financier of corporates, but we've tended to be a financier of corporates, those corporates that require the largest tickets and have the strongest balance sheets. This is something that we're going to change over the coming years, and specifically dedicated to the Greek market, we're going to be looking at expanding our capacity to do smaller tickets with mid-cap smaller companies. EIB has traditionally not taken tickets of less than 25 million. For Greece, we will explicitly be looking at taking tickets for direct lending with mid-cap corporates of upwards of from 7.5 million. We think this will make an important difference. And critically, we'll be making that funding available in the form of growth capital. What do I mean by that? I mean essentially making investment decisions which have a quasi-equity character. In other words, where we are prepared to look at financing a growth story for a corporate, where we recognize that the ability to service and ultimately repay our loan will be dependent on the achievement of growth, indeed the growth that we're intending to finance through our financing. So here are three rather practical suggestions. I think, first of all, to the public sector, please prioritize and please follow through. To the IFIs, please look at innovative ways of financing indirectly through the banks, both liquidity and risk-taking. And thirdly, practically, again, to the IFIs and certainly to EIB, look again at your different models of financing directly private sector entrepreneurship, and notably smaller companies, which make up the bedrock, of course, of the Greek economy. Thank you.